even going back to 1959. But I think the effort to, normally the research that's done in Africa, I call it extractive research. And what that means is an analogy from all the mining that goes on. The minerals are taken and you leave very big holes out there. What happens to the research? It's always taken out. It ends up in beautiful libraries in Europe and developed countries. I hope, and the beginning here of even the taping all of this and going it on stream and for people in Africa to hear this, I think this is a wonderful, wonderful step. And this cannot be called extractive, although one can turn around and say, and how many Somalis have television and have access to computer and will be, you know, eating up all of this. I think it's a very good beginning, and I'm very encouraged by what Peter and this university college are doing in terms of making this research effort something that is of direct relevance to everyday politics in a place like Rwanda, in a place like Kigali, where people can, at least if they have access to this kind of exercise, if Theo and Peter cannot be allowed to have this engagement in the university in Kigali or in one of the suburbs, at least it can be done from a distance. But how do we make sure that this work is available? How do we make sure this incredible, in terms of files and documentation here, is made available at least to those who are being trained on the traditional legal fields, and the future generations of not only Rwanda, but the Nigerians, Ethiopians, and whoever. I think we all need that. And I want to thank and encourage Peter to keep up the good work. I was really very concerned. I was out of the country when I heard over the BBC and actually CNN that he was in prison in Kigali. I was extremely worried for his life. I'm glad he made it, that his life was saved and he's with us and is doing this wonderful work. This is my first time I'm meeting the ambassador, Theo and Paul. I think it's a wonderful group, and I have become a member of, honorary member of these enemies of the Rwandan state. I think by association I'm going to be part of this crowd, so I will postpone any future plans to go to Kigali. Yes, sir. Yes. And you have been a very wonderful group audience, and I hope this flame will be kept very much lit, and hopefully will be of direct relevance, as I was saying, to what's happening back home in Africa. Thank you very much.
Well, we're certainly past the time we originally had scheduled, but I've been thinking about this from the standpoint of the person who introduced me to a deeper story of Rwanda than I would have been able to find out myself, and that's Ambassador Flatten. It's a bit emotional because Ambassador Flatten put himself on the line about truth-telling when the rest of the world had concluded that I was a genocide denier because of the propaganda coming from not only Kigali but from the United States. And actually, it was the CIA that had me in custody in Rwanda, not the Rwandan government, because the U.S. Embassy had reports that I was going to be arrested the night before I was arrested, and they didn't tell me. So it wasn't a completely Rwandan operation that had me in prison in Kigali. But I'm imagining, knowing Bob as I do, that the great hopes and the great work that he had put into the Arusha Accords process. Thank you. I'll take it. For nearly 4 years of his life, Bob put everything he had into making the Arusha Accords process work. He tried to warn all parties of what was coming after the Burundian tragedy. And then he went to the State Department and worked 24 hours a day during the genocide, trying to make sure that things kept on track the best he could. And now the information that's coming out is also beginning to explain how difficult it was to accomplish what his goals were, not because of his shortcomings, but because of issues beyond what people were wrestling with at that time. And I'm hoping it'll favor us and the people watching with your thoughts about having been through this experience now, that I hope puts the kind of truth and reconciliation on the agenda that you worked so hard for these many years ago back on the agenda. And maybe we could have a few comments from you before we close.
Speaking the truth is a lot harder for somebody like Dale and Paul, who are threatened by it personally, physically, as well as emotionally, than it is for an outsider. But I believe that if we are going to help in any way overcome the kinds of animosities which have led to murders, we have to speak to each other in truth and hope that that will lead us to be able to get along in some reasonable way together. I will close with the humorous one note. When I would invite Rwandans to come to my office, I would always serve coffee. And usually I would give them a cup that had big golden rim by the American Embassy and showing that this was the American Embassy. But I drank for another cup. I drank from a mug which said, "Love me, I'm Norwegian." I tried to tell Rwandans that was the only real message we have. We have our ethnic roots, and we're proud of them. But that doesn't in any way interfere with me being the ambassador of the United States of America. So love me, I'm Norwegian. Love each other.
I've got a few, just one remark in closing, and then we'll be available to talk. This event was put together very quickly. It's broadcast to the world because its intention is not to affect just people's thinking here in St. Paul, Minnesota, but to affect people's thinking worldwide. What we now know is that the entire story told about how the Rwandan genocide came about was a manufactured story created in the Rwanda Tribunal by the United States, financed by the United States, and we in the United States have a responsibility for straightening this out. What's going on in Africa now is a tragedy, and it's going to continue as long as U.S. foreign policy is not in the hands of people like Bob Flotten, but is in the hands of people like those who run the State Department, or in the Pentagon, rather. And right now we have an outsized foreign policy based on a State Department that has about the same budget as the military bands do in the Pentagon, within the Pentagon. We've got a big struggle. And if the American people are going to save the America that we're proudest of, to help Africa, it's going to start here in the United States. The Rwandans and Africans have their responsibilities, but we have them here too. So we're hoping to live up to those responsibilities to the people around the world who are seeing this for the first time. But we will not stop, because truth is the only way that reconciliation is possible, and it's the only way we can build our nations. And I want to thank all of the gentlemen who came here tonight to help do this, because this is just the beginning. As Paul told us earlier, his coalition, his campaign is going on truth and reconciliation. We have the truth because we have the documentation, and in the long run, I think we will prevail. But these gentlemen made it possible to take this message to the world, and I thank all of them.